LSU lands one of the top cornerback prospects in America. Is DBU back? Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you so much for that. Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. What to get for Corey Raymond and the LSU Tigers as 4-star Havon Finney has committed to LSU, doing so on his mom's birthday on Monday. Hayes Fawcett of On3 first reported the news and quickly spread because good news is want to do. Let me start off by telling you a little bit about Havon Finney, how he fits, what it means for LSU's cornerbacks room, and we'll get to the rest of the show, including an update on former LSU defensive back Greg Brooks Jr., and we'll preview LSU Southeastern in baseball. That's all on today's episode of Locked on LSU. So let's talk a little bit first about Havon Finney and why this is a really big deal. First of all, we could start with the recruiting rankings and all that stuff, because I know that's what a lot of people are very much into and want to know. So Havon Finney is a 4-star in the On3 composite. He's ranked number 55 nationally, the 7th best cornerback in the country, and the 9th best player in California, which obviously is a massive state. So don't lose that. In the composite, where you take the 4 recruiting services, On3, 24/7, ESPN, and Rivals, and you average out their rankings. That's how you get the composite. So when we say that number, that's what we're talking about. So the number 55 overall player in the country, regardless of position. For what it's worth, Rivals already rates him as a 5-star. They rate Finney as a 5-star, the number 17 overall player, and the number 2 cornerback in America. So no matter what scouting service you subscribe to, this dude is among the most elite in the country at any position, and at or near the top of the list of the top cornerbacks in America. 6'2", 170 pounds, so still some room to grow into that body. He is class of 2026, so he's finishing up the spring semester of his junior year. He'll be a senior next year in high school, and he'll sign in December. But I often say this, y'all, it's less about your recruiting ranking, your star rating, any of that sort of stuff. Who offered you? Well, this is about as impressive an offer list as you can imagine. LSU, Southern Cal, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Penn State, Miami, Tennessee, Texas, Florida State, Oklahoma, Georgia, Washington, UCLA, BYU, Cal, Michigan State, Arizona, and then some smaller schools that probably offered him when he was early in the recruiting process that had no chance ever of landing him. San Diego State, Nevada, Colorado State, Washington State. Anyway, the point is, Havon Finney is a super elite prospect. Did I mention he's from Los Angeles? He goes to Sierra Canyon. And you just went to L.A. and snuck a 5-star cornerback out of L.A. when USC and Oregon were among his finalists. Yeah, safe to say that's the kind of pull we've kind of become accustomed to at LSU with the DBU era that hasn't really happened since Corey Raymond had left, but is starting to come back, as you can very clearly see. In this most recent signing class, DJ Pickett, 5-star, number 1 cornerback in the country from Florida. Now you go to the other coast and you look at Havon Finney, a high 4 or 5-star cornerback from Los Angeles coming to LSU. That, my friends, is the power of Corey Raymond. That is how Corey Raymond has done this for his entire career and pulled the best prospects in America. All-Americans, Eric Reed, Jalen Mills, Jamal Adams, Greedy Williams, Grant Delpit, Derek Stingley, Tre'Davious White, Christian Fulton, Dante Jackson, Therold Simon, Rashard Robinson. The list can go on and on and on and on. You get it. And truthfully, when you look at where LSU was at the time that Ed Ogeron got fired, is you had Elias Ricks and Derek Stingley and Dwight McGlothern all in the same secondary. Ed Ogeron got fired. Stingley had some injury issues, of course, went pro. McGlothern and Ricks transferred out. And you saw this exodus. And in Kelly's first year, they brought in a solid transfer class, better than I think most had expected with Mekhi Garner, Jarek Bernard Converse, but the high school recruiting dropped off precipitously. And it was maybe the biggest mistake, or one of the two biggest mistakes Brian Kelly made when he was hired, was bringing in Brian Polian as his recruiting coordinator and not retaining Corey Raymond. Brought in Robert Steeples, gave him his first ever college coaching job as the DB coach at LSU. I mean, it was doomed to fail. I mean, you were going across the country to recruit Jeremiah Hughes in Las Vegas. Listen, the only time LSU should ever be getting on a plane to go recruit a kid is when you're flying to Florida to recruit DJ Pickett, or you're flying to California to recruit Havon Finney. You don't get on a plane to go recruit a 3-star in Las Vegas. That's not how LSU built DBU. This is how you built DBU. Now, as we kind of look to what the cornerback room is going to be the next couple of years, it kind of gives shape to why the Havon Finney commitment is a big deal. So remember, they still have the DB room split. So Corey Raymond is recruiting and coaching the cornerbacks. Okay, so we're not talking about safeties. We're talking about just the cornerbacks, because Jake Olson coaches the safeties and is the primary recruiter on the safeties and all that sort of stuff. So when you look at the numbers, you have Ashton Stamps returning for his junior year in 2025. And then you went in the transfer portal and you added Mansour Delane and Jakeem Jackson. Of course, Jakeem Jackson is a former top 5 cornerback in the country who signed with Raymond at Florida and then transferred from Florida to LSU following Corey Raymond. Had a little bit of an injury history in Gainesville, which is why maybe he didn't flourish the way his recruiting rankings and projections might have, but he fits the bill, as does Havon Finney, of what Corey Raymond wants. He wants tall, long, athletic corners. DJ Pickett 6'4", Havon Finney 6'2". Just think back through the years of Greedy Williams and all the guys we just talked about. Derek Stingley. You're talking about big, long, Rashard Robinson, big, long, athletic corners. Harold Simon. That's what Corey Raymond recruits. So when you look at it, Jakeem Jackson, Mansour Delane in the portal, joining Ashton Stamps. So, and Stamps was a starter for you a year ago. So that's 3. Remember, Zy Alexander's gone. That's 3. And then you're returning guys heading into their sophomore years in PJ Woodland and Michael Turner. So it's 5. And then you've got your freshman class coming in with DJ Pickett, Aiden Anding, and Jacob Bradford. So that's 8 cornerbacks for this coming 2025 season. But you can look at how the turnover and the attrition is going to affect LSU after this season, particularly at the top. Because Mansour Delane is likely going to be gone after one season in Baton Rouge. And he's your, by the way, go watch spring. He's your best guy. It's very obvious. There's a lot of talk, does Delane play safe? No. He's your best cornerback. And it's obvious Mansour Delane's going to play corner. And he's going to go pro after this year. So Delane. And then we'll see what Jakeem Jackson elects to do after the season. And the same with Ashton Stamps, who could go pro after a 3rd season in Baton Rouge. Could choose to return for a senior year. We'll see. NIL rev share changes a lot of those conversations now. So it's hardly a foregone conclusion that juniors are just going to leave. Harold Perkins is back for a senior season. So Garrett Nussmeier is back for a 5th season. So we do see that a little more often. But you could lose all 3 of those guys. They could all return. But it's natural to think that you're going to lose someone in that group, if not a couple. And then also, you're going to see attrition with guys transferring out. And it's not to say that that's unique to LSU. That's everywhere. So you have to replenish your numbers. And no doubt next year, LSU will do it in the portal. But they also have to make sure they're doing it in the high school class. And Brian Kelly has been adamant they want to recruit through the high school ranks and supplement through the portal. Well, what does supplementing through the portal look like? That's what's changed from when he initially got here and they were heavy in the portal to leaning out in the portal, but not necessarily getting impact guys, to this year where You've now added 17 players in the portal, and all 17 are immediate impact guys. So it's changing how they're doing it, but it's important to note that the developmental guys are the ones that really don't have the spot anymore. Because if you're going to go heavy in the portal, the 3-star that you're bringing in to develop doesn't really have a spot. Sometimes elite guys will come and wait. Tyree Adams is a great example of that at left tackle. He's now going into his 3rd year. He sat for 2 years behind Will Campbell, was patient, developed, waited his turn. Now he's probably going to be LSU starting left tackle. So I look at the cornerback position. Look, DJ Pickett's going to play this year as a true freshman. No doubt about it. Whether he's a starting boundary corner, whether he's a slot, nickel, however it may work, he's going to be on the field as a true freshman. And someone like Havon Finney should be on the field as a true freshman in 2026 as well. In what role? Don't know, but expect him to play and play immediately. So for LSU now, that's the 10th commitment for the class of 2026, and LSU currently has the number 1 class in America for 2026. Tristan Keys, the number 1 receiver in America, is the 5-star that sort of leads the way. Richard Anderson, the number 1 interior defensive lineman in the country from New Orleans, is the 2nd highest rated prospect in this class. And then Havon Finney, the 3rd highest rated player in this class for LSU for the class of 2026, behind only the 2 that I previously mentioned with Keys and Anderson. So a massive get for LSU and Havon Finney. Now you got to hold on to him, but a major feather in the cap for Corey Raymond after getting DJ Pickett in 2025. Now Havon Finney in 2026. Former LSU defensive back Greg Brooks continues his recovery from a harrowing experience with brain surgery. And he and his father, Greg Sr., gave an interview on The Pivot with Ryan Clark. Watch the full hour-long interview, and I have some thoughts on it we'll share next. It's Locked On LSU, your team every day. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I use Gametime. Mostly the all-in pricing. It means no surprise fees at checkout, so what you see is what you pay. And with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. The last 19 months for the Greg Brooks family have been sobering, harrowing, terrifying, challenging, tiring. There's many different ways to describe it. As we all know, back in September of 23, after just 2 games, Greg Brooks had emergency brain surgery when it was discovered after a scan after the Grambling game in week 2 that he had a brain tumor. Complications from that surgery have left Greg Brooks, as a lawsuit has defined him, permanently disabled. We followed Greg Brooks's journey as closely as we can. The family was very secretive, not in a negative way, very private, maybe is a better way to say it, for about a year. And this past February, Greg Brooks and his dad, Greg Brooks Sr., sat down with Michael Strahan for a brief interview that aired on Good Morning America. And the thing that was maybe the most revealing was criticism of head coach Brian Kelly for his assumed lack of communication with Greg Brooks and the Brooks family during the ordeal. And that drew a lot of criticism, and Brian Kelly did respond to that criticism, denying it and doing so forcefully. This week, Greg Brooks Sr. and Jr. sat down with Ryan Clark for an interview on The Pivot. Now, for some context, both Ryan and Greg Brooks Sr. grew up in New Orleans and played ball together, as they discussed in the interview. And it is an hour-long sit-down. And the way it was structured is first, Ryan and Greg Jr. visited for about 15 minutes. Then Ryan visited with both Greg Jr. and Sr. together. Then Greg Jr. left, and it was just Ryan and Greg Sr. for the duration of the interview. Now, I'll tell you candidly that me here, it would be a better show if I showed you clips of the interview. I'm not going to do that for a couple of reasons. Primarily, I don't have permission to do that, and I would certainly like to respect their copyright privileges. And also, there is a good deal of vulgarity, as Greg Sr. became very emotional during the interview. And so I would encourage you to go watch it if you feel so inclined. There are no subtitles, and at times it is difficult to understand what Greg Jr. is saying because, as you can tell, his speech has been impaired as a result of the procedures that he had, the emergency surgery that he had. But I had a couple of big takeaways, even more so than the Good Morning America interview, because this was a longer form conversation. It wasn't a long conversation that was edited down into a 5 or 6 minute chat to air for television. This was a long form interview that could be aired in totality on YouTube, which is where you can find this interview. And a couple of things struck me. I think Greg Brooks Jr., his attitude is something that's inspiring. This is a young man that should be playing in the NFL. But by his own admissions, he doesn't hold a grudge. And he even says, when Ryan Clark asked him if he missed playing football, quote, sometimes I look at the screen and be like, that's supposed to be me, but I'm just happy to be here. When he was asked about his goals, he said, quote, my goals are to get better every single day. Do not lose faith, have sight on the future. Do not lose hope. Just keep fighting no matter how hard it gets. He also said that football-wise, quote, I'm just happy because of all my friends, my teammates, everybody. They're living my dream for them. I'm completely fine with it. Now, his dad, Greg Sr., told a very different story. And I'll read you this quote, and I understand reading the quote isn't as impactful as playing it for you, but I think you can appreciate why I'm choosing not to play that for you. He said, quote, this is Greg Sr. now, with Greg Jr. not in the room. He said, quote, you don't think that kid is suffering? You don't think this expletive hurt him? To see all his friends' success? To not hear from your head coach in over 17 expletive months? That's hurtful. We played the game. He was talking to Clark here. We know what happens inside those buildings. That kid is suffering. On the outside, he looks good. He's strong, but he's suffering. What might have been different in this interview was a little bit more of the clarity that Brooks Sr. went into in his criticism of Brian Kelly and of LSU. And he reiterated some of the things that he had said prior, which was that Brian Kelly had not called or been in contact. In one quote, Brooks Sr. says, quote, look at the phone records. Kelly has never called us as a head coach. His mom, Greg's mom, don't know what he sounds like. There's people on that staff that know he never expletive called. Stand up and do what's right. What was also interesting about this interview, and I understand fully that this paints Brian Kelly in a very negative light. And I'm going to reiterate something now that I said when the GMA, the Good Morning America interview aired. There are two sides to every story. And in the minds of the Brooks family, very clearly, they don't feel Brian Kelly did enough. And in Brian Kelly's mind, he feels like he has been involved to whatever degree he can. And I'm not saying either is right or wrong. There's probably truth in both. For example, I'll credit Ryan Clark because he did challenge Greg Brooks on this. Ryan Clark very plainly said there was a day that Ryan Clark, was at the hospital and Brian Kelly and Frank Wilson were there. And Greg Sr. said, let's make this clear. When Greg Jr. left Baton Rouge in October of 23, we never heard from Brian Kelly, never heard from him. I had to approach Brian Kelly about why he wasn't coming to see Greg. Frank Wilson knows that. Verge Osbury knows that. Referring to, of course, Frank, who's on the LSU staff, and Verge, who's an administrator. Brooks Sr. said that Kelly came to the hospital maybe 4 times. Listen, there's going to be a court case because the Brookses are suing LSU and the health system that cared for Greg. And I don't know how that's going to play out. They'll have evidence and they'll have a trial, and I don't have any comment on that. There's nothing. I don't know any of the. There's nothing for me to comment on. I don't know any of the evidence. What I do know is that I still feel today the same way I did when the Good Morning America interview aired, which is that a public war of words between Greg Sr., Brian Kelly, and subsequently Greg's attorney, which happened after the Good Morning America interview, and Brian Kelly rebutted the accusation, and then Greg Brooks' attorney then released a statement rebutting Brian Kelly. A public war of words doesn't serve anybody. For Greg Sr. to say Brian Kelly was never in communication, and then to say that Brian Kelly visited 4 times, he visited 4 times. And I'm certain that as a father, that doesn't feel like nearly enough. I had a life experience with my child. We were in the hospital for 9 months with my son. And you better believe I know people who visited and who didn't. And I know you learn a lot about who cares, really, in those situations. And I'm sure there are people who thought they did enough, or for whatever reason didn't come, and chose to stay away. And everybody has reasons for whatever, and I don't know that they're always malicious. I'm only sharing you my personal experience in this instance. But the truth is, none of that matters. I can understand as a father feeling like you want people to care about your child. I can empathize with that. I've had that life experience. I can also understand Brian Kelly being the head coach of LSU and being pulled in a lot of directions and going to the hospital 4 times may have felt adequate. And he also said that there were members of his staff that were always there. Maybe that was at the directive of Brian Kelly, that someone from that staff was always going to be there, even if it couldn't physically be Brian Kelly. I don't know. Again, I'm speculating. I'm not defending. I'm speculating because it's all we can go off right now based on the little we have. But to me, none of that matters as much as Greg Brooks Jr. getting every bit of care that he needs to allow him to be the best version of himself for the rest of his life, whatever that looks like. And that shouldn't have to take a legal proceeding to happen. It's the right thing to do. For LSU athletics, for the state of Louisiana, Greg Brooks Jr. should have every bit of medical care that he needs to be the best version of himself for the rest of his life. And that should be completely inarguable. The adults in the room need to do the right thing. I'm not so much interested in a war of words. I'm interested in Greg Brooks getting better. And I think that's what everybody probably wants. And I hope that's what everybody wants. So my hope, prayer, would be that the adults can come together and recognize a war of words and feuding doesn't serve anybody, the least of which is Greg Brooks Jr. Use your resources to make sure that he gets what he needs to get better, however that may look. And it probably will never look like what it did when Greg Brooks was making plays in the SEC on football Saturdays. But it can certainly look a lot better than it does right now. And that's the responsibility of the adults, to make sure that Greg Brooks Jr. has what he needs. Hope that makes sense. And I'd love your feedback on it. Okay. I will clumsily transition, and we'll wrap up next. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy. Whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, from three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. The LSU baseball Tigers are going to be back on the diamond Tuesday night as they'll host Southeastern Louisiana. The Lions 33-11 this season come to Baton Rouge, where LSU at 36-9, fresh off very impressive series win over Tennessee at the box. This has been a long-standing series. These two teams, first met back in 1937. LSU has won 33 of the last 33 meetings, including twice last year, 4-3 in Hammond and then 8-4 in Baton Rouge. Since 1990, LSU is 50-4 against Southeastern. Again, since 1990. So that's in the last 35 years. A little bit about Southeastern. As I mentioned, they're 33-11 overall. They're 18-6 in the Southland, and they won 2 of 3 against Houston Christian this past weekend. This is a pretty good offensive team. They are batting .300 as a team with 71 doubles and 72 home runs. So keep in mind, they're at 72 home runs in 44 games. So that's about 1.5 home runs per game for this Southeastern offense. They are pretty potent offensively. They, on the mound, have a staff ERA of 3.31 and an opponent batting average of 2.19. You can tell this is a pretty good team. Ryan Braum is hitting .355 with 12 homers. TJ Salvaggio hitting .328 with 11 homers. Connor O'Neill, .301 with 12 homers. They got some dudes in the middle of that lineup with some pop. So an LSU pitching staff that at times this year has struggled a bit is going to need to be effective and efficient here on Tuesday night against Southeastern. With Kason Evans and Zach Cowan both pitching on Sunday, you will very likely see Connor Ware get the ball for LSU. Connor Ware or William Schmidt in a starting role. But because you had such effective outings from your starters, you didn't go too deep into your bullpen, too much length in your bullpen. So this will be an opportunity to get a lot of guys work. Whether Ware or Schmidt starts or Jaden Newt, you're likely going to see all three of those guys. And then your general parade of regular relievers with Maverick Rizzi and Cooper Williams. The guys that at this point, DJ Primo, who Jay Johnson has shown he'll go to in key situations on weekends, are the ones you want to get mound time and work in a game like this. So for LSU, it'll also be interesting to see if Cade Arambidi continues to catch in the midweek, as we have seen. And if Jay Johnson will stick with Jake Brown in right field, which he started in right field all 3 games this past weekend. If you're an everydayer, this should come as no surprise to you. I have been championing that cause for basically the entire season. Brown's one of your best players. He needs to be in the lineup every single day. And he was this weekend, and we saw more of a platoon at DH, where on Sunday, for example, Josh Pearson started. When Tennessee went to the lefty, Ethan Fry went in, walked. Whenever they put a righty back in the bullpen, Ashton Larson had 2 at-bats, a strikeout and a single. So he managed to get all 3 of those guys ABs in advantageous situations, and it worked out for you. So if you want to continue to platoon at DH, fantastic. But this is a situation where Jake Brown's got to be your everyday right fielder, and I would think that would include a midweek game as well, especially considering how last week in the midweek went with LSU getting run ruled by by Northwestern State. So LSU and Southeastern from the box. It'll be a 6:30 first pitch in a midweek game. And then after that, of course, LSU will head to College Station for a road series against the Aggies, which lost and was swept this past weekend against their rival Texas in Austin. That's a pretty desperate situation now for Texas A&M, who's got to keep their eyes set on still making the postseason with a pretty formidable stretch ahead of them here over the final 3 weeks. But for LSU, first things first, Tigers will play Southeastern at the box, 6:30 on Tuesday. And, of course, we'll have your post-game show live here on Locked on LSU. Remember, as soon as the LSU baseball games go final, boom, we are live here on Locked on LSU. So on the YouTube channel, so be sure to join us there. Hey, thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. If you are listening on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.